everyone. My name is Heidi Rugg. I'm a puppeteer, and today we're going to spend a little bit of time in my studio. I'm not sure where you might have seen puppets before. Maybe you've seen them on television, perhaps you've seen them in movies. Sesame Street, The Muppets, even Star Wars all feature many puppets. I work with different kinds of puppets, and when I talk about kinds of puppets, I'm talking about how the puppets work. So the kind of puppet I think most people are the most familiar with are hand puppets, which of course just means a puppet that goes on your hand. I have some ping pong balls here that have just fit really nicely over my hand, and this is a really good way to show how a hand puppet works. So you can do this with me if you like. You can hold up your hand, make the number 4, and bend your wrist down. Bending your wrist down is important, otherwise your puppet is staring up at the ceiling. But if we put the ping pong balls right over our hand, you can see that we can make the puppet look around, open its mouth, maybe be surprised. And by moving my hand, I control everything that the puppet does. I also work with other kinds of puppets though. And another kind of puppet I work with is actually a rod puppet. And I'm going to use these same eyeballs to show you a little bit about how rod puppets work. So, a rod puppet is a puppet that you can operate by holding onto a rod, in this case a spoon, that I can make look around. And so you can see that it's really easy to take just an ordinary spoon and turn it into a puppet. And speaking of ordinary objects, is this a puppet? I mean, we saw that I could just turn a spoon into a puppet, but this is a kettle and it's obviously, well, it's not a puppet, is it? Or is it? One of the questions I always like to ask people is, what is a puppet anyway? How do you define what a puppet is? And so I always like to say a puppet is any object that you manipulate and give it life to communicate something, usually a story. But you can see that just by flipping this kettle upside down, which this actually was a camping kettle from our actual camping kit that I discovered was a puppet. And so now it's just always a puppet. It's actually a kind of puppet called an object puppet. And it's easy to imagine that the spout is a nose and the lid is now a mouth. So lots of things can become puppets. So we saw that we could turn a kettle into a puppet and even a spoon into a puppet. But puppets can, of course, be a lot more complicated. We can add all kinds of things to our puppets. We can add eyes, detail, fur. We can even add teeth. I have here a wolf puppet. And our wolf puppet is made from foam and fabric. And we even have some sharp teeth. I move this puppet just like you saw me moving my hand earlier, with my hand inside it and my wrist bent down. I open the mouth by moving my thumb up and down. And I try to have it so that my puppet is looking down just a little bit, so it has better eye focus with everything around it. Eyes are really important. One of the things I love to do is I love to use ping pong balls to make eyes. I have here a little tiny bush baby puppet, super cute. And I've used orange ping pong balls to make the eyes on this puppet. Maybe just a little bit nervous. These were really fun to make. Of course, I've also used the regular kinds of ping pong balls. I have them in a reindeer puppet right here. And in the reindeer puppet, you can see that I just used the regular white ping pong balls. And I can make the puppet look up and down and all around, just like the other one. But this isn't the only kind of hand puppet that you can make. You can also make hand puppets that are a little bit smaller. And this glove style puppet, as it's called, enables me to move the entire puppet. So I have a little squirrel. And this puppet works a little bit differently from the wolf and the bush baby and my reindeer, because when my hand is inside this puppet, I have my 2 fingers. They're able to control the head. And then these fingers control the arms of the puppet. And then my puppet is able to move around. And in just a little bit, I'm actually going to show you how you can make this kind of puppet with some things from your house that you'll be able to find and make some puppets really, really easily. But before we get to that, I want to show you some rod puppets too. Rod puppets are super fun, and they can come in all kinds of shapes and sizes. I have a tiny little worm puppet right here that is a rod puppet, and you can see it's a rod puppet because I have 2 rods or sticks that control the puppet and allow me to make it move around. Another really simple puppet that I have that is a rod puppet is my butterfly. Now this butterfly puppet is made of fabric, and the body is actually covered with jute, a kind of rope material, and I'm able to flap the butterfly wings just by moving the rod up and down. But rod puppets can be more complicated. One of the things I use to make rod puppets do need tricks. I actually use springs in a lot of my rod puppets. And I have a frog puppet right here. Another puppet with ping pong balls for the eyes. And my frog puppet right here has legs that kick way out, so as the puppet leaps or jumps across the stage. The control down here where I hold the puppet, however, has a spring, and this spring is something really important for helping the puppet jump across the stage. It actually works kind of like a rubber band. This is a spring called an extension spring, and the extension spring stretches out like a rubber band, and then it snaps back, pulling the puppet rods back together again. You can see that there are actually 2 rods on this puppet to make it jump. But I also have a sea turtle puppet, and the sea turtle puppet, the complicated stuff is a little bit hidden away. In the sea turtle, there is a rod that is inside the shell of the puppet. The shell of the puppet, when I'm holding inside, there's a lever or a trigger that my fingers can pull. The fingers pull down and allow me to move the mouth with a special string. And actually, if you x-ray it, it looks kind of like this. You can see that there is a compression spring that squeezes and then pushes back to control the mouth moving open and close. So those are just some of the ways that we can make puppets, hand puppets and rod puppets here in the puppet studio. But let's look at some ways that you can make puppets in your own home studio. So to get started making your very own puppet, you're going to need to get paper tubes. You can find some from paper towel, even toilet paper tubes. Those all work. And grab a pair of scissors, any kind of tape, whether it's masking tape or Scotch tape, markers, crayons, something to write with. I like to use this black Sharpie. You're going to need some colored paper. It can be construction paper or cardstock. And for one of the kinds of puppets, you might also need some chopsticks or little wooden dowels or skewers from your kitchen. So go gather these up and we'll get started with some puppet making. So to get started, you're going to take one of your shorter tubes and you're going to cut a piece of the paper out to be about the same height. You're going to wrap the paper around the tube and then tape it on, holding it tight and secure. Don't worry about the tape being visible because we're not going to really be paying attention to that side of the paper tube anyway. This will eventually become the neck of our puppet, but for right now we're going to set it aside while we work on the fun part, the head. So, using your roll of tape, go ahead and trace a circle onto the piece of paper, and then go ahead and cut it out. This circle is going to become the head for your puppet. And now for the super fun part. It's really fun to build a face, And I always get started with the eyes. I do like to sometimes make really, really big eyes on my puppet, but you can make yours smaller. Putting a nose on the puppet can be a little bit tricky, so I'm going to show you 2 ways to do it that make things a little bit more simple. You can make a nose that sticks out by cutting out a nose shape and creating a fold in it. You can attach, using tape, this to the center part of your puppet to create a nose that sticks out. If you have some invisible tape, some Scotch tape, you can also attach a nose by just cutting out the shape and then attaching it directly to the puppet by putting the tape along the outside edge. Once you have that firmly attached, you can add your eyes. I like to play around with the eyes a bit before I attach them to the puppet. The eyes can really drastically change the expression of a puppet, as can the puppet's mouth. So I've decided that our puppet is not just going to have eyes. Our puppet also needs to have some eyelids. Eyelids really do a lot to change the mood of a puppet. With just a few simple changes, I can make my really goofy big-eyed puppet look kind of mad. Or I could make the puppet look a little bit sleepy. Adding a mouth will also change how my puppet looks. My puppet now looks very, very upset. I think I don't want to have a super grumpy puppet today. So I'm going to flip this mouth upside down. Now he looks kind of goofy. I think if I make the eyes a little bit uneven, he'll look even goofier. This will work for me today. Once you have your pieces parts taped down to your puppet face, now you're ready to attach it to the neck. All you need to do is position the puppet head over top of the tube. You're going to tape it very, very carefully to the tube. Don't tape it way up high to the top, unless you're making a giraffe. You want to tape it so that the puppet is nice and secure with a nice long piece of the tube securely holding the back of the head in place. So once you have it attached, you can slip the tube over your 2 fingers, and you can use the 2 fingers to control the head of the puppet. And then these other fingers work just like they did for the squirrel puppet to become the arms of the puppet. You can create all kinds of different faces and expressions for your puppets. You can even add hair to your puppets. Or I really like this one with the baseball cap. Though this puppet does look a little bit grumpy, doesn't it? We're also going to see another way to make puppets using this paper tube that are a little bit different. So another way to make a puppet is to take one of these tubes, and this time try and see if you can find some black paper or even black tape that you can wrap around a tube just like we did in step 1 of the puppet. Once you have that covered up, we're going to be transforming this into a penguin. You can take a piece of white paper and cut some eyeballs out, attaching them to your puppet. Then you can build on, adding to it a beak and a body part. And just like the other puppet was held with the 2 fingers, you can also hold this one with 2 fingers, or if you want to get really fancy, you can attach a rod using a popsicle stick, a chopstick, or a dowel rod. So I was 10 years old when I started making puppets, and I don't know how old you are, but there's no age that is too old or too young to begin building puppets. Now you know how you can make some puppets out of some very simple materials that you might have around your home. Your local library will also have many books on how to make puppets. And there's a lot of tutorials also on the internet. So on behalf of myself, I'm Heidi Rugg and Barefoot Puppet Theater.
And me.
And yes, and our squirrel. We hope you all have a fabulous rest of your summer and go make some puppets.
Go make some puppets.
Thank you.